Hello, this is Mark as Singularity, and this is going to be the third video based on reading posts to Trans Liaison of the overview of a model to increase transgender community success. And this is going to be major item 3, which is, as I find it, as I scroll back up to it, very, very long. Liaisoning between the connecting trans community and the general, typically cis public. In this, we form a measure to tell the public how that suddenly, recently unprecedented advances in transitioning procedures and its availability have completely rewritten anything they were likely to have thought they had known about it. Old former reasons not to transition, like poor end results, needing almost to be mistakable for the target sex to begin with, prohibitively exclusionary restrictiveness, ridiculous gauntlets like forcing a person to endure a year's worth of just dressing the part. And if you're still alive at the end of that, then they'll give you the hormones. King's ransom, exorbitant expense. Nope, all that's gone. Transitioning works now. And it even works on people who are especially birth sex reading. Very feminine born girls and very masculine born boys. And fully transitioned people are publicly undetectable and rarely detectable even at all, except by close medical examination. Even just some degree of medical transitioning often works for many trans people. Is something that cis people, if they knew about us, would have a much different impression for what the barrier is or is not, is it no longer is, for a trans person to realize, self-actualize, publicly readable gender expression. It's no longer a prohibitive undertaking that they used to think it was. And even trans people who didn't learn the news grew up thinking that. Okay, continuing, we tell the cis community the fact that transgender is also many, many times more common than they had previously been told. The underreporting had been due to all of the other transgenders either hiding their expression because of the stigma, or due to everyone's denying it even when it might have been right in plain sight, due to the routine denialism of anything that's been sufficiently stigmatized. So this really is a lot of people we are dealing with. A lot of people terribly suffering in an enforced silence about it. And what they do here, they highlighted this part. They didn't want it. This is directly from LGBTQ Nation. Direct quote. In a world where the very word for simply what they are is still the standard go-to insult in any cheap joke's punchline. Paraphrased, reworked just slightly, but I retained the essence of it. I didn't just spin that out of thin air. That's from LGBTQ Nation, and I read it there yesterday. It's not the first time they've said it either. Continuing, we tell the cis community One way that non-trans cis keep repeating that definition, people try to soothe themselves that there are a lot fewer trans people than there actually are, is by pretending to themselves that what they are looking at when the person they spot is trans is actually just someone who were gay or lesbian. Some trans people are those things, although it then means that if they were born female, they love men, which would make these confused cis people say, well, that means they're straight. And if they were born male, and they're trans, they love, and they're, what is it, if they're gay, they would love women, because of course they are women. And then the confused cis people would say, well, that would make them straight too. No, you're not getting it. And it might take a while to explain the way that works, that they would get it. But the point is that it's part of the fact that sexual orientation is completely irrelevant to and independent of gender identity. And I might be able to write that better soon. This whole thing is the first time I've attempted to write this all up, so there's got to be some more things to work on in it. Returning to what we say to the cis community to help them understand that we're not rare, we're not invisible, we're not impotent socially, politically anymore. If you are pretending that the given person you're seeing who is trans were not trans, because, okay, that's just a recapitulation of what I just said, skipping, telling the cis community that trans people are a real presence and they are socially co-competent with cis people. They're not some little anomaly, some little throwaway anomaly when they do come around. Many trans people who grew up when the so-called standards of care, which at that time was largely a contradiction in terms and really better describable as the proclamation of restriction against care, carefully taught themselves, always strenuously, publicly, or to certain family members or neighbors, to deny that they were transgender, even when some caring people might simply be trying to ease them out of this self-imposed identity denial. No, you can't tell me I'm a woman. You can't tell me I'm a man. I'm the one who best knows. No, no. Listen, you're trying way too hard to, put a little cocktail umbrella on the top of the head of the elephant in the room if you tell me you are not trans. That's what they're trying to tell some of these really well-presenting natural trans people who insist on not being, pronounced right. Because they're afraid to publicly embrace a trans identity, even when it turns into that big of a comedy of errors. And that's another thing that my project aims to address, is this degree to which trans people will hysterically panic at being publicly recognized as trans, even though they're putting their whole life's blood into being the best trans person they can be. And the other thing where cis people will, who walk around with this trans person, are like the proper pronoun police, the, what do you call them, the misgender enforcement police. If anybody calls this person by the right pronoun, they immediately say, no, that's not right. Call them by their cis-normative name or cis-normative pronoun. resuming what's written, we were to tell the cis community why they should care more about us, where it goes toward, okay, so many trans people who grew up when the so-called standards of care were anything but that carefully taught themselves, always strenuously publicly, or certain people to deny that they were transgender, even when some people were just trying to help them not deny it anymore. This behavior may also contribute to the degree to which so many more non-trans, that is cis people, still believe that transgender is so rare that, like many so-called anecdotal phenomena, they didn't want me to say that, it may as well be just an urban legend than ever should have had that kind of doubt of its existence. I don't know about urban legends or anecdotal phenomena, but I always believed that a certain species I had seen photos of in books was real. It was related to, well, it resembled, it wasn't related to, two successively larger species that were said to be either definitely or probably extinct. And I'm talking about a forest-dwelling bird, this large bird that's called the pileated woodpecker. And by the time I was, I think, 50, 49 or 50, I had pretty much resigned myself to never, ever actually seeing a live one in the wild. And when I got my first car that year, and I parked in the regional park that was a nature conservancy full of hiking trails, they didn't even theoretically allow bicycles through it. It was almost the first time that it wasn't winter that I got out of my car, and on the far corner of that parking lot, I heard a loud bird call and looked up, and the first thing I saw was an adult pileated woodpecker. And I saw it for several seconds before it flew away. So, something that I thought, it's not that I denied that it was real or that I told myself it had to be already extinct, but the chances that I would have seen one in my own lifetime, I'd already written that off as it wasn't going to happen. But I would say that that's an apt analogy for people at large who haven't discovered a connected trans community where people just freely and openly discuss everything, and we actually devise an efficient vocabulary for all the concepts that are so taboo at large they don't even have names for them, terms for them. That you've probably written off that a transgender person is just something you're going to see on TV or in a magazine or other media like that. You're never going to have actual face-to-face contact with one. You don't have any in your neighborhood. You don't have any in your family. You never had and you never could have. And the reasons for that is this enforced denial and the fact that the people are taught, no, never admit it. Never admit it, even if it's staring them right in the face. Find a way to deny it because they'll think you're Bigfoot and they'll scream! Apologies to Bigfoot. I think you probably are real. And if I don't want to find out the hard way, you think I don't. That was kind of a joke. It didn't belong, but comic relief or something. Depression is the first word in the next paragraph, continuing from the this is what we're saying to people in the cis community so they understand and appreciate us better. Depression from the untransitioned body is, but no, the depression from the untransitioned body's disconnect with the mind, called dysphoria, transgender dysphoria is especially poorly responsive relative to other depressions to the typical drugs prescribed for other depression. But transitioning eliminates it fully and permanently. Without transitioning, the results are an 8 times the average suicide rate, substance dependency, reclusivity, unemployment or serious underemployment, loss of housing, and becoming victims of murders. Partly because they may not have housing, and partly because of hate crime. Transitioning is done where the publicly visible parts of the person which respond to hormone replacement therapy for transition are done first. This is always how it's done because of several reasons. That's how it really has to be done. If they've been working on this for a long time. They know what gets you good results and they know what is self-defeating. And this is the way it's done. They do the hormone, whatever the hormones can do is done first, and then after that is completed, they will add further procedures. Whether it's surgery on the face, well, then they will do the top surgery on the chest. Sometimes that is somewhere before the hormone replacement therapy transition phase is fully complete, but it's done late in it at any rate. They usually don't bother doing anything to the person's face unless they see what the hormones ultimately didn't do. And more often than not, it's not enough to justify the surgery. It's more often found to be still needed, generally only in MTFs. There are a few FTMs where it might be netly desirable, and as for others who elect to take it, it's just as an enhancement of the readability, whereas without it, it would already have been at least adequate. Where this person had a better, a higher ideal for how they wanted to, how masculine that they wanted to look, is typical reason for an FTM to elect facial surgery after the hormone transitioning is complete. All right, but the fact that the hormones are the only thing in use, and maybe some top surgery late in the hormone transitioning, this works on the publicly visible parts of the person. This area is, and since it's done first, it means that while the person's physical body that you see at a distance is changing, their genitals are still not modified. The hormones modify the genitals in a what might be called a somewhat trivial way. That they're still topologically the same form. The proportions change somewhat. The texture changes somewhat. The amount of hair changes somewhat, and the texture of the hair changes somewhat. But it is a fact that the born female area still has the same major components, the same main components, and the born male genital area still contains the 3 components. Returning to reading, this area is where, I say this area, we're not talking about the genitals, we're talking about their outer outline. This is what an observer spots at a distance. This area, their shoulders, their head, their face, their gait, whether their hips sway, the sculpting of their thighs, whether they look muscular or whether they look adipose. Okay, this is the area where the physical sex reading on an observed person is done on first sighting. First sighting by an observer, generally at maximum distance where they first interview, because that's going to be in your peripheral vision. Oh, figure has appeared, snap your head over there, draw a bead on them, see, read their outline. Okay, that's a male just entered my view. That's a female just entered my view. Once you register it, it's set. You're not really analyzing it anymore because you got other things to think about, or you might have noticed other things about them as well as their gender, their physical sex presentation, their height, their age, and it's an awkward thing. People will usually make some kind of a assessment of what they perceive the person's race to be, and they will sort of classify their type of dress, whether it's business casual, athletic wear, or sort of what do you call somebody who dresses provisionally from a thrift store, not to use any kind of critical language there. Okay, but these things, they're a snapshot. And the person, if you do keep tracking them with your eyes, I mean, that's what is that called? Peering. That's if you want to share the expanded version of the definition of assault, this penetrative, unwanted eye contact is a form of menace or challenge. So, that the person is intuitively trained to take that snapshot and file it somewhere that, you have your information and you keep it inside. You don't just keep hanging on it. This is a relevant fact. That's why I'm making this point, even though it seems to be obvious. Okay, repeating the outer outline of the body and their basic style of motion is where the physical sex reading on an observed person is done on first sighting by an observer. And that is generally the only scan the eye does for that trait of a given passerby, including what restroom they would be expected to have entered. So that finishes that part there. Resuming, people still in the hormonal phase of transitioning still have their old genitals, yet, as I already stated, although their appearance may change somewhat due to the hormones. They will use various measures. The people who look like the target sex from their hormone treatment will use various measures to conceal or to disguise their physical genitals that they still have. Since they haven't had surgery yet, they might never get surgery, but they haven't had it yet. At any rate, when using the public restroom of the sex they outwardly already have come to resemble. Generally, nobody is paying attention anyway, and it would be hard, if not impossible, to notice even then. The basic function of the signs on the restroom door is for people to use the room where they know their direct appearance will not automatically trigger alarm on sight by other users of the room. With the FTMs, well, actually, both sides, you can trigger alarm not only by being seen, but also just by being heard. If they hear the wrong voice in that room, that's a real big trigger all in itself. If you're in a stall and they can't see you, let's say you pass vocally better than you do visually, that can, if all they got is your voice, in that case, it's going to be a larger trigger. than if they both saw and heard you. Now, if it's the other way around, if you pass visibly and you want to show that you're not in it, all right, if you were in the old bathroom and you pass visibly but not what is it? Orally, AURALLY, auditorily. Let's say you look very mannish and you're in the women's bathroom and somebody starts looking at you trepidly. You could just say, "Hi there," and then that will clear up some of the doubt they have about what's in your pants or what is most likely there, or it makes them more likely that they will be willing to listen if you try to explain to them. But I can remember, man, the days when I had the voice I got now is terrible. The one I had back in the time, whenever I'm talking about things like this, I'm in a public bathroom. I don't remember if I had to ask for toilet paper or if somebody was asking me for the time. And I just answered in my normal voice and oh man, it's like hell on earth. I just, man, there's a man in here. No, I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong voice. There's a man in here. There's a man in here. And this was not the time that even if I would have been inclined to do it with anybody else, that I would have tried explaining to them the meaning of the word transgender. I just had to say, no, I sound like a woman. No, I sound like a man, but I'm just a woman. I belong in this. Oh, what's this here? Okay, this is, the basic functions of the signs on the restroom doors is for people to use the room where they know their direct appearance will not automatically trigger alarm. Any law then forcing late in transition people suddenly to revert to using the bathroom they'd already abandoned using because they're otherwise having continued to have used it would have triggered alarm and defeated the purpose of the signs. That's the only pragmatic take on this whole restroom sign business. It's to avoid, triggering panic by having a person that you immediately assess as being someone who could rape you from entering the room or entering the room where you're going to be in an invisible place with people who could rape you, who could be, rape you when they come in. Let's see now, continuing. A person, we're telling the cis person, a person transitioning to female in late transition is already publicly indistinguishable from a born female, and the penis she was born with will by that time have atrophied to the point where it could no longer penetrate even a willing partner and would probably be too small to cause much discomfort, that is, defloration, even if it did. People transitioning to women, which we then say are trans women, not what they traditionally misconstrue it to be called. They would tend to think that they would be what a trans man is called, because he's a man and he transitions to something other than that. I've encountered that's the way they automatically construct it, and they kind of balk at calling them what they are from the beginning, namely a woman if she identifies as a woman and is planning to transition to a woman, or a man if he identifies as a man planning to transition to being recognizably a man. That's another thing I think that the trans liaison model has to find a way to explain how to tell trans people to explain to cis people. People transitioning to women in late transition would no more even dream of stepping into a men's restroom than would a born woman. lawmakers who told the late, no, lawmakers who told the tale that supposedly just hearing that it supposedly would have been legal would have driven droves of rapists to use that law to put on token feminine disguises, like just throwing on an ill-fitting dress and a wig with a gappy hairline, brashly to barge into women's restrooms to look for women to rape. They were able to get away with using this patent hogwash to ram through bills that will force even late transition women to use male bathrooms because trustworthy voters like you, we're talking to a cis person, and we tell them that they are trustworthy voters who only were duped because they were not forearmed with these crucial facts above about how harmless transitioning women are in a women's bathroom and how vulnerable they would be if forced to go back into a men's bathroom. These dishonest lawmakers who just used, and you can make the converse case of forcing transitioning men to go back into a women's bathroom where they're going to get beat by purses and told to get out of here, you rapist! Get out of here, you rapist! You want to see what's in my pants? Hell no, I don't want to see what's in your pants. I know karate. Oh shit, I'm getting out of here. These dishonest lawmakers who just used people like you to hurt another contingent of people will just as soon use a third contingent of people to make yours the next contingent that likewise gets politically hurt. Do you want to do that? I wouldn't. Learn who your dishonest lawmakers will do. If they'll use you to hurt me, they'll use somebody else to hurt you later. Do not trust these traitors. Throw them out of office. Use your vote. And we finish by telling our cis constituents that a society where trans people can make effective use of the impressive medical and medical standards of care breakthroughs that have just so recently become available to them is a society where very many people who currently are furtive, reclusive, underemployed, afraid to buck for promotion, and are poor and less contributive in many respects, can then become confident, engaged, gainfully and actualizingly employed, ambitious, maybe philanthropic, affluent, and more contributing, both as a taxpayer, a citizen, and one of your neighbors. Then I had another section where I also added that if you're concerned about the trans people's relationship to your embrace of family values, that trans people often become parents. If a trans woman is married to a trans man, they can, and they still have their genitals they were born with, they can temporarily suspend their HRT in the case of a trans woman just long enough to get a penetrative erection and ejaculate effectively to impregnate the trans male partner. Then she can go back on her hormones right away. And then he has to suspend his hormones for the duration of his pregnancy and resume it after he has given birth, or maybe if he wants to. No, he probably had top surgery and wouldn't be able to breastfeed. But as soon as he has given birth to the baby, he can resume his HRT, his maintenance HRT, and they have to keep their born genitals until, and repeat that cycle until they've had as many natural children as they want to have by that process, after which they can still have eggs and sperm respectively frozen, and then they have surgical reconstruction on their genitals, and further children will be conceived in vitro and carried by a surrogate mother. So that's two ways there. And additionally, those methods have already been in use for 2 decades by gay and lesbian people. And the third option of adoption also has been available for a couple of decades to gay and lesbian people. And the adoption, of course, has been available to cis straight couples for, since time immemorial. So that's another thing that I didn't add that. I didn't keep that in this expansion of major item 3 in the model for increasing success of the transgender community. And I've covered this now. I thank my viewers for staying with my reading, or were patient with the number of sort of distractions or mistakes that I had within it. So that's the third video, and you finished them all. I hope you liked what I've been able to tell you and that you can use it. And you can give me a comment in the comment section. Hopefully, it will be a respectful comment. I will not tolerate those that are not. And I thank people for supportive comments that they will give, even if they're constructive criticism. Thank you again. Bye bye.